Hello, I'm LegenTerry, and these are my first impressions of Hollow Knight Silksong from Team Cherry. Now, this is a little different from my usual format. I'm not reading off a script. I have a whole bunch of notes sitting over here that I'm using because there's a whole bunch of other games and stuff happening around this time that I'm trying to get ahead of, so forgive me for stumbling over my words and stuff every now and then. But yeah, this is Hollow Knight Silksong. It's the follow-up to Hollow Knight from 2017. Just in case you didn't know, Hollow Knight is one of the highest rated indie games of all time. It's one of the most successful indie games of all time. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of 12 to 13 million copies sold up to this point, which is really crazy. I think that's higher than Undertale even. But yeah, this game was supposed to be DLC, and then they changed plans in the middle of development because they realized their scope was expanding rapidly, and they just spun it off into its own game, which is why it took 7 years up to the point where they had Kickstarter going for it. But this game and the game that came before it are both 2D Metroidvania / action platformer games with Souls-like elements. We'll get more into that a little bit later. My history with the original Hollow Knight is very brief. I think I only played it for about 3 hours back when it first came out, and I just didn't enjoy it that much. A combination of the world, the design of it, and like how you had to unlock the map over time didn't do a lot for me. Just like the colors and everything that were used, it was very grayscale, it was very dim. It didn't feel like it was a world full of life. It felt like a dead world that you were stepping in to explore, and that's the same reason that I don't really gel with the original Dark Souls games. I liked Elden Ring, but also I had a friend to play with, so that kind of changed things. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. If you're coming into this game fresh, Silksong seems like it's a completely separate story from the original Hollow Knight, so you don't have to worry if you're a brand new player. You can start here, and then you can go back and play the original if you want to eventually. I still can't really tell where on the timeline this is supposed to be taking place, if it's taking place before the events of Hollow Knight or if it's taking place afterwards. I'll probably get answers to that eventually. I'm getting close to the end of the first act, and like I said, I've been playing for about 17 hours, so this game is very long, especially if you're a completionist. But yeah, visually, this game is a lot more striking. It's a lot more vibrant and saturated. Like, even with the main character herself, with Hornet, she has like the red cloak that's like fire truck red, which has even changed since like the original trailer for this game came out. It was much less saturated. Again, Hollow Knight was like very dreary and grayscale. By comparison, Hollow Knight at the beginning was very, very open. You could go practically anywhere that you wanted, but it wouldn't always lead to somewhere that you needed to go. And by comparison, Silksong's starting area feels a little more linear by design, so you won't get lost as easily. There are still some offshoots, so you do have to figure that out, like, is this going to lead me towards progression, or is this a pathway for side quests and secrets? It's something you have to figure out for yourself. And yes, you will still have to find a vendor to buy the maps for each individual zone, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I pushed past that because I enjoyed enough of what I was playing. I did still get turned around a few times and wander off track because when you buy the compass, which is supposed to show you where your character is on the map, it didn't show me where I was on the map, and I was like, what the hell is happening, dude? Where the hell am I? Like over here somewhere? It turns out that you have to actually equip the compass as a tool on Hornet's crest in your inventory screen while sitting at a bench. So that's a whole thing that I think is a weird carryover from the first game, which I don't think needed to happen. Now, before I dig too deep into the systems, Silksong has more towns and settlements with NPCs than the original did too, so there's not just one central hub that you have to return to over and over. You can actually explore the map and find these areas dotted around. It's still full of quirky little bug people to meet, and there's an actual quest log to keep track of all the side objectives that you take from them this time around. And Hornet is actually like a participant in conversation. She will actually speak to these NPCs now. There's no more silent protagonist going on. As far as I can tell, there aren't really any choices to make in the dialogue besides agreeing to take on a side quest or not, but it is a refreshing change of pace to have a character that's actually a character that's participating in the conversation this time around. The animations and the background art of Silksong are just as incredible as Hollow Knight's, if not better, thanks to the lengthy development time the team had to improve their craft. I was immediately blown away by the background details that overlap with each other, giving Farloom that real feeling of depth that stretches long into the distance. All of Hornet's moves and attacks are buttery smooth, like they flow perfectly between one another, which, when you think about her being a 2D hand-drawn character, it seems like a Herculean task. There's no tweening or puppet-style animation to kind of fudge the details, just tons and tons of extra frames that one person poured their soul into to make sure that Hornet and all of her enemies looked perfect in every moment. And one of the things that really makes the game shine is the attention to detail. Just like everywhere that you look, you'll notice something neat that the devs spent time on that they really didn't need to. Maybe you beat an enemy and you move on to the next screen, but then when you return to that spot a few minutes later, you'll see that a tiny ant colony has showed up and they've started carrying away the remains of their fallen comrades. Very minor spoilers, but one of the coolest unique interactions that I had happened when I came across a village that had been overrun by cursed silken threads that strung up all of its citizens. Well, Hornet tasks herself with finding a way to break the curse, but as for me, I had to go to work. So I saved by sitting on the bench in town and then I quit the game. When I came back to play some more, the game opened up and showed that Hornet herself was strung up in the air alongside the other bugs until I helped her break free. It's something that I can almost guarantee tons of people missed out on, but was made specifically to catch people like me off guard and unsettled. Like, I will always remember that happening. I will have that ingrained in my brain forever. The audio design is pretty solid. There's a lot of atmospheric presence under the hood with stuff like light gusts of wind blowing through the caves and running water trickling downstream. All the characters that you speak to still do the whole made-up Simlish language thing, and some of them even include some charming little musical numbers when you're close by to let you know that they're there. The combat sounds are nice and chunky, but they did get rid of the effect that they used in the first game where all the sound drops out, kind of like your characters in Shell Shock, and that does make it a little bit harder to nail down when you've been hit by attacks. There are visual cues, but when you're really focused on being aggressive, it's easy to lose track of your health. And yeah, there's more to that conversation coming up, just wait. The music coming from composer Christopher Larkin is a little bit understated most of the time. I remember hearing some of his stuff from the first game and thinking, like, this is very Elder Scrolls Oblivion sounding. And Oblivion is one of my favorite games of all time, so like, yeah, that was cool with me. Silksong's soundtrack has a lot in common with some of the same light touches of like pizzicato strings, woodwind sections, and other notable instruments like the bells, but it feels a little more distinct and urgent on the combat tracks. They're sharper and more intense, kind of reminding you that Hornet is already a trained fighter prepared to strike her enemies with deadly precision. There's a lot to love about this OST, and I'm sure you'll find yourself jamming along to it while wandering the endless maze of passageways and repeating some of the harder boss encounters over and over until your hands grow numb. Gameplay-wise, they are similar games, but also completely different feeling. The Knight in Hollow Knight felt really simple and straightforward to control at the start. You had your normal attacks left and right, and the downwards jumping attack that let you pogo jump off of enemies and obstacles around the world. But Hornet plays more like an acrobat. This still feels like really snappy and responsive, and she has the same left and right swipes, but her downwards jumping attack sends her at a diagonal angle instead. When I started the game, I really hated this for a while. Like, it takes way too long to get a handle on it, and it makes playing with the D-pad feel really awkward, which is like the opposite of what you'd expect from most 2D games that control better with a D-pad. I finally convinced myself to switch to using the analog stick a few hours in instead because I got tired of fighting with the controls when I needed to jump attack pogo through platforming sections. They make you do directional changes in the air after landing one diagonal attack to initiate the next one, and Hornet doesn't really register as turned around for a few milliseconds after pressing sideways. So if you're really fast with the controls, which you kind of need to be, you end up diving in the same direction again face first into a pile of spikes. I found that using the analog stick kind of mitigated the times that would happen to me. Without spoiling too much, you are able to change her dive into a more vertical attack, but doing that also kind of comes with its own pros and cons, and I'll let you figure that out for yourself when you play. Anyways, I do like the rest of the toolkit that I've been unlocking with her so far. Hollow Knight had some magic fireballs and that kind of stuff. Hornet gets a main attack ability and a bunch of tools that you can swap out and add different effects to. The main ability uses her silk meter that's up here in the corner, which is the same resource that you use to heal yourself, but the tools use a new currency called shell shards. The amount of uses that you get depends on the tool that you have equipped, and you can only replenish them by visiting one of the checkpoint benches. The shards that you use, they aren't that hard to find, but I tend to play really conservatively with resources, so I would almost forget that I had tools at my disposal between normal attacks I was throwing out. It also doesn't help that they're occasionally used for other stuff, like for example, there was a side quest that rewards you with the main currency type, rosary beads, for donating a few hundred shell shards to repair a broken bridge. And speaking of rosary beads, these work just like Geo did in Hollow Knight or Souls in Dark Souls games. When you die, you drop the rosary beads and you have to go back to where you died to reclaim them. The only difference is that you don't have to fight your shade in this game. They just get wrapped up in a cocoon that you need to break. and you will probably be doing that quite often. Silksong is a difficult game. The difficulty has been a very big point of contention and conversation around it. I think the devs just sort of assumed that anyone coming into Silksong had played the first Hollow Knight since it was originally planned as DLC, and they forgot about that. So the early hours feel particularly challenging if you aren't used to this style of game. Although that's not just because the combat itself is hard, it's also that some enemies will lock you in and hit you for multiple points of damage at a time. You do start the game with 5 health masks this time around rather than 3, but that doesn't really matter when it still only takes 3 hits to kill you. And you won't be getting more health for a long time. Like, I tell you that I just now got my 6th point of health when I'm like 17 hours in. It is crazy unless you're like farming rosary beads somewhere. Team Cherry has heard the complaints, and they're already hard at work adjusting some of the early bosses and enemies to make their fights a little more reasonable. There is no difficulty mode choice or accessibility features to begin with, so if you're adverse to hard games, just be aware that you may not vibe with Silksong right now. Most of the boss fights I've done are really good, really fun to learn, but there are a few things that I don't like about some of them. For one, there's the run back after death to try them again. It's not always a problem, but some of them are really far away from a bench. Runbacks are never really hard to do, but they're just tedious. And it's annoying when you have to show up to the boss fight missing some health just because some low tier trash you tried to dash past decided to dip just low enough in the air to clip you. Also, sometimes it's not even a boss fight, sometimes it's a combat challenge room that goes on way too long. I got stuck on one with 5 full rounds of these crow looking guys for about an hour and a half because the way these guys move around is completely up to RNG, and it mixes a few different types of them together, and it was not fun to do. But complaints aside, I'm having a really enjoyable time with Silksong. Exploring the world of Farloom and finding all the secret pathways and hidden bosses is really fun. I love the weird little guys that you run into, and the goofy sounding enemies that are fun to beat up. After playing a bunch of Elden Ring and Lies of P and Night Rain, I feel like I've kind of acclimated to the difficulty for the most part. It hasn't stopped me in my tracks yet. But yeah, what do you think about Hollow Knight Silksong? Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.